Coming up on Law Weekly, the issue of judicial independence takes center stage at the Lagos NBA 2016 Annual Law Week. Barrister Robert Emukworo talks to Channels Television on the newly inaugurated Electoral Reforms Committee. Lawyers react to the thrown-out bill which seeks the provision of special grant to be accorded to Lagos State. Welcome to the program. I'm Victoria Ido. Section 17, subsection 1 of the Constitution provides the independence, impartiality, integrity of the court of law and easy accessibility shall be secured and guaranteed. For the judiciary to perform optimally, it should be totally independent. This has been the center of discussion at the Lagos NBA 2016 Annual Law Week.
To restore the confidence of Nigerians in the judiciary, the independence of the judiciary must be guaranteed. That is the basis for this gathering of legal luminaries who are here to discuss moving the judiciary forward and making the third arm of government totally independent of the executive. An experience from a former justice of the Supreme Court brings to the fore the challenges judges face when they try to be independent.
The very first case I had to handle as a judge involved this man who was claiming damages for his improper removal. I had the case, I thought the governor was faulty, and I awarded damages against the governor. Shortly after, we were told, judges in Lagos State, that those of us who wanted land in Ikoyi, in Lekki, could apply. I applied. My colleagues who came with me into the judiciary, about 5 of them, got an allocation of land. I didn't get any.
This begs answers to the question, how can the judiciary be effective in the democratic space?
It is time for another showdown. It is either the judiciary is the third arm of government or it is not. And it is either we as lawyers are prepared to support the judiciary in asserting their responsibility and asserting their constitutional independence to deliver to Nigerians qualitative justice. It's time to take that decision from the bar.
At the moment, it appears the judicial setup in Nigeria does not allow the much-needed independence for the judiciary to perform its functions impartially. This takes a leap from the process of appointment and dismissal of judges, funding and the general conditions of service of judicial officers and personnel, which are basically left in the hands of the executive.
It is the human person, human person, human person. Let us keep interrogating the system and ensure that those who we allow to wield powers of life and death over us are fit for purpose.
Discussants at this summit have reinforced what Section 17, subsection 1 of the Constitution says, that, quote, the independence, impartiality and integrity of courts of law and easy accessibility shall be secured and guaranteed.
Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Mahmood Mohammed, has called for collaborations between the judiciary and the financial sector to resolve the nation's economic challenges. Speaking at the seminar for judges, Justice Mohammed announced that the judiciary is developing a multi-track justice delivery system that embraces alternative dispute resolution.
High Court judges across the 36 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory gather for this year's edition of the Judges Sensitization Seminar. It is organized to create a synergy between the judicial officers and the financial sector, especially in the light of the nation's economic recession.
As Nigeria is making resolute efforts to struggle its way out of economic recession, we must all avail ourselves the opportunities to learn the pertinent lessons from this unpleasant experience and to forestall its reoccurrence in the future. The key, therefore, is constant enlightenment on important issues and that relate to the Nigerian banking system and our economy as a whole.
The Chief Justice of Nigeria believes that the judiciary can step up its processes by collaborating with the financial sector in the light of the economic recession.
The myriad of economic challenges facing the nation no doubt call for greater collaboration between the justice and finance sector. The judiciary, as an arbiter and symbol of justice, must not only remain blind to status, personality, and origin, but must dispense justice in a manner that is fair, transparent, and expeditious.
Justice Mohammed also believes one way of delivering speedy and amicable justice is the alternative dispute resolution, and he hopes that the banking sector will embrace this for an efficient and effective collaboration with the judiciary.
President Muhammadu Buhari has inaugurated a new electoral reforms committee headed by former Senate President Senator Ken Nnamani. The president, who is determined to turn around the nation's electoral system and reduce the prevalence of rigging and violence, appointed a 24-man panel from across board. The committee has been given 10 weeks to submit its report. That's the focus on our interview segment with Barrister Robert Emekworo.
There is a need for any electoral reform is how satisfied are the electorates with the conduct of election by INEC, that is saddled with the responsibility of conducting elections. What has been the reaction even of the candidates who have submitted themselves to the electoral process? Are they satisfied with what has been happening, or have we been witnessing grievances expressed by the candidates? Because where you have a situation where candidates feel aggrieved at the end of every election or most elections conducted by INEC, that is really indicative that there is something wrong either with the system itself, with the electoral body, or with the electoral law itself, because these are three different things. The law itself may be okay, but the body saddled with the responsibility of putting this law in motion in order to achieve a credible elections may for one reason or another be derelict in implementing this law, or the law itself could in fact be subverted.
I know you've done lots of election petition matters. In your opinion, what sections do you think should be changed?
Let me just say Section 49, Section 52. These are, Section 49 itself basically deals with how election should be conducted by INEC. There is a process of what we call accreditation, and then it also forbids electronic voting at the election, and then Section 52 prescribes how a voter should go through the process of voting. I think the whole idea of how an election should be conducted should be left wholly and entirely within the hands of INEC. It should not be something that the Electoral Act should regulate. You see, because under the provisions of the Constitution, INEC is the body that is given power to issue directives and guidelines for how elections should be conducted. Now, practically speaking, INEC is also the body that encounters problems on the field. When they go to the field, they encounter these problems in a practical way. So they are in a better position to issue guidelines. Now, the problem with the Act is that, and that has already manifested itself in the 2002, 2006, and 2010 Electoral Acts. It is difficult to amend these provisions of the Act. Unlike guidelines INEC can issue, you conduct an election today, you see what problems you have encountered on the field, you issue guidelines to surmount that particular problem. But where you have how an election is conducted entrenched in the Electoral Act, even if INEC encounters a problem, they cannot amend those provisions. For example, the last election where INEC used the smart card readers, the Supreme Court, even though didn't exactly declare it as invalid, but at the end of the day, the smart card readers were completely rendered redundant, even though the sole purpose of those smart card readers were to ensure transparency in the electoral process. But the Supreme Court did not use it as a basis of determining whether an election was free or fair or not, for the simple reason that they said from the provisions of the Electoral Act, there is nowhere that the smart card reader is provided for. So INEC, you cannot use it until there is an amendment. But that should not be so, because INEC has the duty to undertake, supervise, and organize elections. So a body that can organize, supervise, and undertake election should be able to prescribe what will ensure that the election is free and fair. So I think the amendment I will propose is that INEC should be enabled to determine how an election is conducted through their guidelines and directives, not through any provision of the Act.
Let's talk about the committee that has been set up and inaugurated. What's your take on the composition of the committee?
I think the composition is seriously flawed, because when you talk of reforming the electoral system, I think the major parties there is INEC itself, and then of course the contestants, the candidates who have gone through the electoral system. They are like, if I may use the word, they are the people who wear the shoe. They know exactly where it pinches. Because INEC, no matter what anybody says, it has more than 16 years of experience in conducting election. They know exactly, INEC knows exactly where the weak points are in the entire electoral process. INEC officers, they know exactly where the points where things go wrong are. And then, of course, the candidates themselves who have gone through the electoral process, they know exactly what went wrong. So these are the people that I think are key in the composition of such a committee. You cannot talk of setting up such a committee without having regard to INEC itself as being an essential part of that committee. You can't talk of composing that committee without looking at the candidates who have actually gone through the electoral process. Until 2015, when this government came into power, President Buhari himself had gone through the electoral process, and he had experienced, between 2003 and 2007, there are experiences that they have gone through that is invaluable to such a committee. They will tell you exactly where things have gone wrong, okay? And then, of course, the lawyers who have actually gone to the election tribunals to try to advocate the cause of their clients on why an election should not stand. These are people with the invaluable knowledge they are not people you should just look at, you ignore. Without them, I don't think you can have a meaningful electoral reform. You really do need these people. So when you look at, it's okay, put the former president of the Senate there. What experience does he have? Has he been to an election tribunal? Because there is an aspect of this reform that people are not looking at, and that is the judiciary. Because at the end of the day, whatever result INEC announces, it is what the courts decide that is ultimately upheld. For example, in Kogi State, people might have held some views concerning the outcome of the election by INEC at the end of the day, but now the Supreme Court has affirmed what INEC has done. So at the end of the day, we need to take that reform beyond just the election itself, but to the judicial arm of government itself, because they play, I would say, the most significant part in the entire electoral process. What has been the reaction of the judicial arm of government to these election petitions? I think it's important to look at their reaction. Have they really tried to look at who was validly elected at an election? Because if you read most, if not all, of the judgments that are coming out from the courts, most election petition cases ultimately get resolved on the grounds of technicality.
Coming up after the break, lawyers react to the thrown-out bill seeking economic assistance for Lagos State.